Am I OK? A story of quiet storms and inner peace. Dakota had learned the sound of a room before she learned its faces. There was the hush that came right before people noticed her, the slight lift in energy, like a tide turning, the way conversation thinned into murmurs, then rearranged itself into polite excitement. The familiar choreography of attention. In the beginning, she used to fight it, tighten her shoulders, sharpen her smile, brace herself like someone stepping into cold water. Later she learned to float. Smile, wave, offer a few words that sounded warm without revealing too much. Let the cameras catch what they came for. Let the night move along. But lately, something had changed. Not outside, everything looked the same. Red carpets, flashing bulbs, the recurring question, what's next? Her name printed in clean, confident type. Inside, though, the rhythm had started to stutter. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a breakdown in a hotel bathroom or a sudden crisis that could be explained neatly in an interview. It was smaller than that, and therefore harder to describe. It was a question that rose like a bubble from the bottom of her chest at unexpected moments. While she was zipping up a dress, while she was eating alone, while she was laughing with people who loved her. Am I OK? It didn't feel like fear. It felt like honesty. And it felt, strangely, like the beginning of something. The film had come to her quietly. No fireworks. No grand pitch full of glossy promises. Just a script emailed late at night, the subject line unassuming, the attachment name simple. A story about a woman who seemed fine until she realized she wasn't. A story about friendship, identity, longing, and the soft terror of looking at your life and not recognizing the shape of your own happiness. She read it in bed with her hair still damp from a shower, her phone face down so it wouldn't buzz with the world. She read it with that rare stillness that happens when the day has finally loosened its grip. By the third page, she stopped seeing words. She started seeing herself. Not literally, not in some vain actress way, but in the way a story can touch a place in you that you didn't know was exposed. The characters weren't famous. Their problems weren't extravagant. There were no car chases, no glamorous tragedies. Just ordinary human confusion, messy, tender, sometimes funny, sometimes aching. The kind of confusion she'd spent years hiding behind good lighting and better timing. When she finished, she didn't cry. She didn't even move for a long time. She just lay there, script resting on her chest, staring at the ceiling as if the answer might be written in the shadows. The question rose again. Am I OK? And for the first time, she didn't rush to silence it. Filming began on a gray morning that smelled like rain. Dakota arrived early, as she always did. It was a habit from childhood. Show up before anyone else, observe the room, figure out the mood. She liked to know where she stood before the noise arrived. She liked to get there before the world could tell her who she was supposed to be today. The set was small, intimate, no extravagant trailers, no army of assistants. Just people who seemed focused on making something honest. Her co-star greeted her with a hug that felt unpracticed. The director asked how she felt and waited for the answer as if it mattered. A production assistant handed her coffee with a smile that didn't look rehearsed. It wasn't that she was unused to kindness. She'd met wonderful people in her career. But there was something about this environment, its gentleness, its lack of performative intensity, that made her chest unclench. She stood in the wardrobe room later, looking at her character's clothes. Jeans that didn't flatter, sweaters that looked like they'd been washed too many times, shoes chosen for comfort rather than allure. It was a strange relief. For a moment, she felt invisible in the best possible way. And that invisibility felt like peace. They shot a scene where her character sat alone in a car after a party. The party itself wasn't shown, only implied by the muffled noise outside, the smear of light through the windows, the slight glitter on her cheekbone. The camera stayed close, watching her face as she stared forward, breathing shallowly, as if the air had gotten heavier. Dakota didn't have many lines. It wasn't necessary. As the director called action, Dakota let herself become still, not the stillness of posing, but the stillness of someone trying to hold herself together while something inside quietly shifts out of place. She thought about all the times she'd walked away from a room full of people and felt lonelier than she had before she entered. She thought about interviews where she said she was happy and almost believed it. She thought about the strange sensation of being adored and misunderstood at the same time. And the question came again, not as a thought but as a feeling that slid under her ribs. Am I okay? Her eyes filled, not with tears that fell dramatically, but with the kind that hang there, shimmering, undecided. When the director called cut, the set stayed quiet for a heartbeat longer than usual. Then someone whispered, almost reverently, "That was real." Dakota nodded, swallowing. She didn't know how else to describe what she had done, except that she had stopped trying to be impressive. She had simply been honest. Halfway through filming, she started waking up earlier. Not because she had to. Because her body insisted. She would open her eyes at 6, sometimes 5, and lie there listening to the city breathe. A distant siren, the hum of someone's air conditioner, birds that sounded surprised to be alive. She started making tea instead of coffee. She started taking short walks without her phone. She started saying no to things she didn't want to do, even when it felt uncomfortable, even when she could imagine the disappointment in someone's face. It was a small rebellion. It was also, she suspected, the beginning of self-respect. One morning she found herself standing in front of her bathroom mirror, face bare, hair a mess, eyes puffy from sleep. She looked younger and older at once, young because she wasn't wearing any armor, old because she could see the years in the set of her mouth. And she asked herself aloud, voice barely more than a whisper. Am I okay? The question didn't scare her anymore. It wasn't a diagnosis. It was a check-in, like placing a hand on your own shoulder. She waited. And something inside her answered, not in words, but in a sensation. A gentle settling. Not always, but I'm here. She exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. There were people in her life who had also asked that question, in their own ways. Jamie, for example, had always had a talent for looking steady while carrying storms. He had the kind of charm that made people assume ease, the kind of presence that made others relax around him. But Dakota had seen him on quiet days, in the soft hours between obligation and performance. She remembered how he sometimes stared into space after a long day, jaw tight, eyes distant. Not unhappy exactly, just somewhere else, somewhere private, somewhere no one else could reach. He didn't talk about it much. He didn't have to. There was a way he would rub the back of his neck, or breathe a little deeper than usual, and she would understand. He's trying to be okay. There was Amelia too, one of Dakota's oldest friends, a woman who had never been famous but who had survived her own kind of spotlight. Amelia's life was quieter, but her mind was loud, always asking questions, always judging itself for wanting more or less than what it had. Amelia once told her, during a late-night conversation on a balcony, "I think people assume peace is a personality trait. Like you're born with it or you're not. But maybe it's something you practice." Dakota had laughed softly then, but she remembered it now. Practice. As if inner peace were a muscle, not a gift. Celebrity, she realized, had its own weather. Some days were sunny, compliments, awards, moments where the world seemed to agree she was doing something right. Other days were storms, headlines, rumors, someone else's opinion about her face or body or voice or choices. And then there were days where the sky was simply gray, nothing happening on the outside while something churned inside. People talked about fame like it was a staircase. You climb, you reach the top, you enjoy the view. But the truth was it was more like living in a house with glass walls. Everyone could see in. Everyone thought they knew what the furniture meant. Dakota had become skilled at decorating for strangers. But the film, Am I OK? Asked her to do something else. It asked her to live in the house like it was hers. It asked her to show the messy corners, the doubt, the awkwardness, the longing. It asked her to stop performing wellness and start exploring what wellness actually was. And that exploration wasn't glamorous. It was uncomfortable. It was quiet. The day they filmed the scene where her character admits the truth, finally, shakily, like someone speaking a foreign language, the set felt unusually silent. Even the crew moved softly, as if noise might shatter the moment. Dakota stood in a small kitchen set, hands gripping a mug. Her character's best friend sat across from her, eyes wide with concern and love and confusion. The dialogue was simple, the kind of conversation that could happen between anyone. But Dakota felt the weight of it as if it were a confession. As the camera rolled, she let the words come out not like a performance but like a surrender. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said, voice cracking slightly. "I don't know who I am. I keep thinking I'm fine, but I'm not." When the scene ended, she felt something inside her shift. Not because she had delivered it well. Not because it would make good cinema. Because she had meant it. Not exactly her life. Not exactly her truth. But close enough to touch something real. Afterward, she sat alone on the edge of the set, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. The makeup artist approached and asked if she wanted a touch-up. Dakota shook her head. "No," she said gently. "I want to feel this." The premiere came months later, as premieres always do, suddenly, impossibly fast, like time had been waiting around a corner. Dakota wore a dress that looked effortless, but she knew the amount of effort it took to create effortless. Her hair was styled to look like it wasn't styled. Her makeup was designed to look like she wasn't wearing makeup. The world loved a woman who looked natural. Dakota smiled at the irony. On the red carpet, reporters asked what it was like to make a film about self-discovery. They asked what she hoped audiences would take from it. They asked whether she related to the character. She answered with grace, with humor, with just enough honesty to feel safe. But inside, beneath the sparkle and the noise, she was listening to herself. Not the public self. The private one. The one who still asked questions in the quiet. She felt the question rise as she posed for photos, as the cameras flashed so brightly it was almost painful. "Am I okay?" This time, she answered without hesitation. "I'm becoming okay." After the premiere, she escaped to a small hotel room alone. Not lonely, alone. There was a difference she was learning to appreciate. She took off the dress carefully and hung it in the closet like a costume. She washed her face until it was just her skin again. She put on an oversized t-shirt and climbed into bed with her hair still pinned up. Her phone buzzed with messages. "Congratulations. Proud of you. You were amazing." She scrolled slowly, letting the warmth seep in without relying on it. Then she received a message from Amelia. "Did it feel like you? Or like someone you're trying to become?" Dakota stared at it for a long time. She typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, she wrote. "It felt like me, but quieter." Another message came a minute later. "That's the best kind of you." Dakota smiled into the pillow. And for a moment, the room felt profoundly still, like the world had stepped back to let her breathe. There was another message later, shorter, unexpected, arriving like a pebble dropped into a calm pond. From Jamie. "Heard it's beautiful. I'm glad you made it." Dakota read it once, twice. Her chest tightened, not in pain, but in recognition. The connection wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a longing that demanded action. It was simply a thread that had never snapped, even if it had loosened over time. She didn't know what his life looked like now. She didn't need to. She could imagine it, busy, full, complicated in ways she couldn't see. But she could also imagine him watching the film one day, late at night, alone, pausing at certain scenes not because he recognized her, but because he recognized the question. Am I okay? She typed back. Thank you. It was scary, but good. Then, after a pause, she added, hope you're okay too. She stared at the words for a moment before sending them. Then she pressed send. And it felt, strangely, like peace. In the weeks after the film's release, she heard stories. A woman told her at a screening that the movie made her realize she'd been lying to herself for years. A young man wrote online that it made him call his best friend and apologize for disappearing. A middle-aged couple said it reminded them how easily people forget to check in with their own hearts. Dakota listened to these stories with a kind of awe. She had spent so much of her life believing she was creating entertainment. Something to distract people, something pretty. But this film did something else. It held up a mirror. Not a glamorous one, a human one. And in that mirror, people saw themselves. Dakota saw herself too. Not as a celebrity, not as a brand. Just as a person learning how to live with her own mind. Inner peace, she discovered, was not silence. It wasn't the absence of anxiety or sadness or confusion. It wasn't a constant glow of happiness. It was something much simpler, and much harder. It was the ability to sit with yourself without flinching. It was the willingness to admit you're not okay without treating it like failure. It was knowing you could feel lost and still be worthy of love. Dakota began to practice it in small ways. She started meditating, not the Instagram kind, not the performative kind. The messy kind, where thoughts kept interrupting and she kept returning, again and again, to her breath. She started therapy again, not because she was broken, but because she was curious. She started spending more time in nature, where no one cared who she was. She started letting herself cry when she needed to, without turning it into a story. And slowly, the question changed. Not disappeared, changed. Am I okay? Became. What do I need? Which became. What do I want? Which became. Who am I, when no one is watching? One afternoon, months later, Dakota sat at a cafe alone, wearing sunglasses not to hide but to soften the world. The sun was warm but not harsh. The air smelled like bread and citrus. People moved around her without staring, without recognizing, or if they did recognize, they didn't disturb her. She sipped tea and watched a dog chase a leaf in the wind. And she realized something surprising. She felt calm. Not thrilled, not triumphant. Just calm. The kind of calm that doesn't announce itself. The kind that feels like your nervous system finally unclenching. She took out her notebook, an old habit from her teenage years, and wrote a single line. Inner peace is letting life be complicated without turning it into a catastrophe. She stared at the sentence, then underlined it twice. She thought of Jamie, again, briefly, not as an ache, but as a reminder. A reminder that people can share something meaningful and still move on without erasing it. She thought of Amelia, who had always insisted that peace could be practiced. She thought of herself, younger, quieter, trying to learn how to exist under bright lights without burning. She put her pen down. And in the soft noise of the cafe, she asked the question one last time, not out of fear, but out of tenderness. Am I okay? This time, the answer came easily. Yes, she thought, not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. She smiled, small and genuine, and went back to her tea. Outside, the wind lifted the leaves again. And Dakota, for once, didn't feel like she had to chase them.